Okay, hello everyone. My task is to talk about low-code tools today and how we're using them at Hyvä. I don't want to waste time about this, just my role at Hyvä at the moment includes integrating the Magento system we are using, Hyvä.io, with other systems, and that's my experience with that is what inspired me for this talk. So my presentation is roughly divided into two parts. The first part is the general part about a certain low-code tool and what they can do, and the second part is about what we do at Hyvä. And well, let's dive just in. It's using low-code tools, it's mostly about integrations. Integrations between different systems, and in our case, as we are at a Hyvä Developers Paradise, which is strongly connected to Magento, it's mostly about connecting Magento with other systems. It could be a PIM, it could be an ERP, it could be CRM systems, it could be Slack or Discord or other messengers. It could be the Google apps like Sheets and so on. There are lots of possibilities for integrations. And the old style was more or less doing the integrations in Magento or in one other systems, having a point-to-point integration, and the more modern approach is the event-driven architecture. It mostly replaces the old style, which consisted of requests and responses, and now we are more using events, and we create events which consist data and send them somewhere else, and these other systems consume them, but it doesn't have to happen synchronously, so we can do it later whenever the resources are there, whenever it fits. Webhooks is another name for this type of architecture, but I don't really like to use it, just for reference. So this also means we usually use some kind of middleware which sits in between and requests data from one system and forwards it after perhaps some processing to other systems. The concept of middleware is not new. If someone remembers the old fabric of Magento back in the days, well, it's there for some time, but the tools have improved a lot. The middleware is one place which controls the data flows. You, as the user of these integration tools of the middleware, can see what's happening, can see when errors occur, can change things easily in the flows, some data mappings, for example. And these middleware tools are usually experts for data exchange. So it's all about data coming in, data being modified, data going somewhere else, perhaps data being stored somewhere. Everything can be done by those middleware tools. And there are a few things which make them experts, like HTTP requests are the general method we do. They are experts for that. They can handle timeouts and authentication and logging, monitoring, retries, and so on and so on. And so they are just built for that task of exchanging data. I'm using one example here, which is called N8N. N8N is short for Nodemation. Node.js, and automation. And it's just one example. There are others like Zapier or Node-RED or a couple others, but they basically work the same way. And I'm using N8N because it was recommended to me. I like it. It's an open source tool built by a company which is, as far as I know, in Berlin. You can use a self-hosted version, as we do, or you can use a software as a service version and don't have to manage anything yourself, but instead you have to pay, of course. It has a kind of large community. There are a lot of community-built nodes which you can use. You can find it on enlightened.io, but it's really just one tool for the job, and there are several others which can do the same job more or less the same way. This one has been proven. Just a very simple workflow. Workflow always consists of nodes, these squares here. We start with a node which is receiving some data, some nodes in between which are modifying data, doing some switch statements or whatever, just doing other stuff. And then in the end, we have one or more nodes which output data somewhere else. This is an example, a real-life example, a little bit simplified, which we use in practice. It's an integration of GitLab. So we have our Hyvä documentation at GitLab, and whenever some change is committed and merged, then we get a webhook call from GitLab, and this flow is running. We modify the data, we change the file names into URLs with a middle node, and then in the end we send a Slack message to the documentation Slack channel. A very complex workflow would look like this. Also a real-life example, don't worry, I won't go through it in detail, not at all. It's just one example when we create a credit memo. So when we do a refund in Magento, this is the workflow which we are running, which connects Magento, sends data to our bookkeeping software, creates a PDF, or triggers creating a PDF in Magento, fetches this PDF, sends it to the other software, has some error flows, which happens when the bookkeeping software issues an error, and so on and so on. So just a glimpse at what's possible with these tools, and I am pretty sure much more complex workflows are possible, especially as you can have sub-workflows. So it's like functions in a regular programming language. It's in this case, we are using a few sub-workflows here for getting configuration or generating configuration. It's hard to read, I know, or for getting some data, specific data from the bookkeeping software. Workflows, as I said, usually consist of input nodes, processing node, and output nodes. When we are using those low-code tools, we usually speak of triggers. So a workflow is triggered by something, by operators, and by actions. And I'll show you a few examples of what triggers, operators, and actions we can have in those workflows. So triggers, the main triggers I am usually using are the webhook and the cron job trigger. So the webhook trigger, it's a REST API endpoint, which can be called by any other system. Of course, we can identify some authentication, set up a basic authentication, for example, or OAuth. There are a few other types of authentication, so not everyone can execute that trigger with some random data. And we can also define the path, the URL, set it up as we want. And have some other settings, like having a production and a test URL as differences. The second most used trigger, at least by me, is the cron job trigger. We can just have workflows which run every 30 minutes, every day, every month, to do a task and fetch some data from some systems and process it and send it to another system. We are using that, for example, if we want to compare unpaid invoices from Magento with unpaid invoices from our bookkeeping software. And if it's paid in one system, we mark it paid in the other system. We do it regularly, I think every 30 minutes, but you can set it up as you want. There are some other triggers possible, like we can have email triggers, so whenever an email comes in, we can react to that and pass the text of the email. We can have, as I already mentioned, the sub-workflows. So if it's a sub-workflow, then it will be triggered by another workflow, and so on. There are a few more examples to that. Interesting use cases are possible. So then we have the operators. There are a few flow operators which define, for example, where the data is flowing. For example, we can have if then else constructs. So one example would be if we are processing orders, if it's a Molly order, we go one route, and if it's a non-Molly order, which we have to process manually, we go another route and don't mark the order as paid at once. And just one simple example. We can have loops, we can merge data, we can extract data. And it's you have quite some possibilities to work with data. Also, as you see on the right, there are possibilities to work with files, with XML files, JSON files, image files, HTML, or as you see in the middle column, there are some other operators to split out data or merge data again. So if you want to, for example, filter your subsets of data, if you have an order and your subsets could be the items of an order and you only want to process some items and ignore others, then you could split out the items, filter them, and merge them again. So we have 3 nodes and don't have to write a single line of code to make that filter. It's just a little bit point and click. There's one extra important operator which is used, which can be used for quite a few purposes, and you can do a lot with them. If you're familiar to JavaScript, it's a code operator. So you can write it in JavaScript or even with Python. You can use imported NPM packages, especially if you use the self-hosted version. And with this JavaScript code, you have the possibility to manage the data, to modify the data, filter the data, create completely new data sets, depending on all the previous nodes, which makes it very flexible, very versatile. Also, this is, you can put a lot of JavaScript in it. I would usually restrict it to like 10 or 20 lines of JavaScript, and that's the size of JavaScript which can be where AI tools, for example, can help you a lot with. You can tell ChatGPT to generate the JavaScript you want to have, and the results can usually quite good, and you find out by testing if it does what you want to do, even if you're not a proficient JavaScript developer. Of course, it helps being a JavaScript developer, but it's not absolutely needed. So the actions, the output of the flows we have, there are lots of examples. I'll show you the most popular ones, which are these, at least according to the n8n websites. You see a lot of SaaS tools are in there, like Slack or Telegram or Google Sheets or Gmail, Airtable, Discord, and so on and so on. There are a lot of predefined integrations which you can use to send your data to. And I'd like to put the focus on the one integration, one output node I use the most, which is the HTTP requests, which sends data to some other tool using integration, using authentication. You just have to define the methods, the URL, the authentication, and the data, of course, you want to send. And this node is very, very flexible. You can build almost any HTTP request with it. I haven't found an example where it was not possible. So probably all HTTP requests are possible with that. And one tool I'd like to point out is the functionality to import from CURL. So if you have crafted HTTP request call via the command line, you can copy that from the command line, insert it here, paste it here in that node, and it will set the parameters and all the headers and so on its own. Very flexible, very nice, and works really well. And one step further, if you, for example, are working with Magento as an endpoint, you have Swagger as a tool. And Swagger, again, is a helpful tool to test your API calls. In this case, the Magento API calls. And it offers a possibility to output your test request as CURL. So you can copy it from Swagger to N8N and have your HTTP request ready. You can replace any data parts with placeholders if you want. And so it's pretty simple to craft your HTTP request node with that. Okay, let's get to the second part. How are we using N8N at Hyvä? And this is our setup. We are using the main tools. Of course, it doesn't consist of everything. For example, we have some newsletter tool, but it shows the most important tools we are using. We are using Magento for our hyvä.io website, which is closely integrated with packages. We use, for that integration, we use the old-fashioned integration type in PHP code, partly because it was already done before I started by Vinay, but also it's a very close integration, and yeah, probably it would have been possible with N8N, but this is a kind of integration where I think it's very plausible to use that old style of integration. And we're using GitLab to manage our code. We're using N8N in the middle, as I'm just presenting. We are using Moneybird as our bookkeeping software, which is a SAS tool from the Netherlands, and which has a really nice API. And we're using Slack as a communication tool internally and externally with our community and with our clients. I'm focusing on this part, data exchange between Magento via N8N to and from Moneybird. And I think it will show nicely the main parts, the most important parts we are doing at Hyvä. So this is a medium-sized workflow which we are using for the order creation. So we have a webhook as a start on the left, which is called by Magento. Then we have 3 paths. The first path on the top, it's just a small code node with 3 or 4 lines of code and a Slack message, and the code node is just for extracting the item data and putting them into nice text. So we can see which product has been ordered, for which sum and which license is behind that, which domain. And we send that information with general order information, like the name of the customer and the order number to our internal Slack channel, so our sales team can have a look. And even for me, as a developer, it's nice to see the orders coming in. Just informative, not absolutely necessary, but really nice to see. Then the middle node and the lower node are both communicating with Moneybird. So this is a sub-workflow where we get the contact ID of the customer from Moneybird. It basically sends the company name and some other data like the VAT number to Moneybird, and if the customer already exists, if they have ordered before, then we get the contact ID back from them, and if it doesn't exist, we send all the data we have to Moneybird and create a new customer, a new contact, and get the ID back. And the lower weight is we retrieve the current text weights from Moneybird, and we filter them with the second node because they are different by company, especially it's the Netherlands, which have a text rate of 21%, but we want to stay flexible and not hard code it, so we retrieve the text rates and filter them by country. And at this point, we merge the data flows again. So we get data from here, and from here we have the contact ID, we have the text rate, and this node also waits until both flows are finished. Whichever flow finishes first, waits for the other flow, and only once this has happened, the data is merged again. It's modified a little bit with another script or code node, which also uses data from the first webhook node, which has the initial order data, and crafts the JSON data which Moneybird needs. And in the end, we send that data to Moneybird. In case of success, we send another Slack message, short one. It has worked, basically. And in the error case, we send a different Slack message to a different channel saying this was the error message from Moneybird. Sometimes, it happens, Moneybird was down, and we just try it again. Or we have made an error. Last week we had a case where some customer had a quotation mark in their company name, and we didn't catch that, and so we got an error from Moneybird. And you see here there's also one other line going out. It goes on. Basically, it requests a PDF, the order PDF, which is generated in Magento, and forwards the PDF file to Moneybird, and some more processing around that, more Slack messages, especially if it hasn't worked. You might ask, the first step, this webhook, how is it triggered? Because Magento doesn't offer a native functionality to trigger an external URL, and I have done a separate presentation at last year's Meet Magento UK about exactly and only that topic, and you can find it on YouTube easily. If you don't want to watch it or just want the information, the basic information now, I can tell you there's a very good module by Andreas called Async Events, available on GitHub, actively managed, and it's message queue based. Usually you use RabbitMQ as a message queue, but it can also use the MySQL queue, so you don't need anything extra. And it provides several of the common events, especially regarding orders. And what makes the module so special, it's much more than just sending out here URL requests. It has retries built in, it has logging built in, it has the admin management built in, and so on and so on. So it can be used also if you have 100,000 events per hour or so. And at Hyvä we have a couple of events per hour perhaps, but still it's very scalable and really good to use, and a high recommendation from me. So coming to the end, slowly, how do we use low-code at Hyvä? I've given you an example. We are using the free version of N8N, install it on a server we have rented from Hetzner. There's an instruction manual about installing that at the N8N website. We mostly use it to automate license sales. So everything which has to be done after a customer has created an order on the Magento shop, like sending out emails, like creating the PDF, like executing packagist commands like prolonging our licenses in packagist. And those are the events we are using: sales order created, sales order paid, because we only create the license when the order is paid. Usually, if you're using Molly, it happens directly, but not in all cases, and especially if we are using bank transfer, we have to wait a few days. We have a workflow for cancelled orders and one for credit memos which have been created. We use it to send out Slack notifications, and as I showed you before, we have a workflow to send Slack notifications to the documentation channel. And also, which is a nice, very different use case, it's a web form, because we can also create web forms in N8N, which if you have the access data, you can fill out, for example, with the order number or the client email address, and you get the customer data back, the order data back, the license data back. So that's a nice workflow as well, triggering some requests to different systems, Magento and GitLab. So yeah, very, very flexible tool. Why do I like low-code integration so much? I've made really good experiences. I have used them at my previous job, but not so much, and I'm using them a lot in my work at Hyvä, and it's really fun to use. Usually when I have several tasks and one of them includes working with N8N, I do that task first. So it's very subjective, but for me it's fun to work with that. And yeah, it's easy to use, it's easy to debug, because you see every flow, every data set at any position, and any error message which may happen, you see directly. And in most cases, it's either a problem with one of the APIs or with one of my scripts, but in general, it's quick to find out, and some edge case like quotation marks, which I haven't covered. It doesn't need too much development experience. Of course, it helps a bit, but what's more important is, in my opinion, understanding of data. So if you know how the data is structured in Magento, it helps a lot. And yeah, also if you know what data you need in the ERP system or whatever system you are connecting to, it helps. And a lot of that is basically common sense and having an understanding of data in general. It also helps with clean architecture, because instead of having a module for an integration with 20 classes and 2,000 lines of code, we have a workflow with 20 nodes and like 50 lines of code. And if it looks nice, it's also kind of clean. So it really helps with that type of clean architecture. Less code, more control. At least in my experience, you cannot do everything with that, but you can do a lot of that. And one additional example, what a lot of people are using it for, is connecting some data with Excel or Google Sheets. So if some data is filled in a web form in a Magento shop or whatever, you can add a line or modify a line in your Google Sheet and have everything what you have in Google Sheets calculate automatically. And so it can be used for controlling, for example, or for other tasks. And that's a really nice example what extended use can mean. Also, which is kind of new, you can use AI tools inside N8N. Of course, you don't have to. We don't use it up to now. But you can, for example, have some data coming in, let's say via email, and run it through an AI tool and give perhaps a suggestion what you can answer that customer, and have it as a draft email. Just an example which a dear colleague told me yesterday. There are a lot of integrations possible with external AI tools, but also with self-hosted AI tools. And that's more advanced usage of, for example, N8N or other low-code tools. So that's it from me. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Andreas. Oh, I've got a question over here.
Hi, Andreas.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I have a bit of experience with Make, which is, I don't know, you know Make?
No.
Okay, it's a tool like N8N, and I never use N8N, but it does the same identical stuff, but it's just in cloud, so you cannot install on your own server. So I was wondering if you have experience on migrating all the stuff from Make on N8N. So no?
No, obviously not.
Okay, no,
But
that was just the question.
I'd say in most cases, if you don't have hundreds or thousands of workflows, it makes sense to rebuild them. There are always some tool-specific nodes and some details which are done differently by the different tools. So in most cases, it will take 1 or 2 days, I'd say, and you have them recreated, especially if you have the base structure working. We've made many integration from Magento, like you did, to ERP, then triggering on payments on Molly, and then sending email on Klaviyo. So many integrations. So yeah, maybe spending 2 or 3 days migrating everything would be a good solution, because in this way, like we always say, owning your own data on your own server is always a good solution. So probably I would take a look to N8N. Yeah,
thank you.
Do so. If you have any questions.
I would be happy also to show my integration we make and exchange ideas. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? This one.
Hiya. So in some of the workflows, there were quite a few error kind of paths out. Does N8N store historical data of what's come in, and can you retry from N8N, or do you have to get whatever sent the webhook to resend the data?
Yeah, we have specific error workflows. We can set it up by workflow, which happens in case of an error. For example, you can set up to remain all the data from error workflows and throw away the data from successful workflows after a while. And you can set up the error workflow, which can do whatever you want. We have an error workflow which just sends the error message to one specific Slack channel, but you can also send it to some logging tool or whatever tool you want.
Thanks, but can you go into N8N and retry that whole workflow again?
Yeah,
okay.
You can.
Thank you.
It's just another type to set it up.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Andreas? Yes.
Hi. I have a question because let's say that this is the first time that I've been on those things, and I am interested in because you say that it's a possible integration between Magento, for example, and Google Sheets. It's possible to do in the opposite side, for example, to manage the stock just with these simple low-code tools and use Google Sheet to control the stock in Magento?
I didn't fully understand the question, sorry.
It's possible to control with these low-code tools and webhooks to control the stock in Magento from Google Sheets, for example.
Yeah, that's fully possible, because there's a web API provided by Magento, and you can have a trigger which triggers on changes in the Google Sheets, and then if some quantity column, for example, is changed, you send the data via API to Magento. Okay, that's possible.
That's the point. The trigger on Google Sheets to do the update. Okay, so good. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You can also find me the rest of the events. So
Yes.
Thanks again.
We have a Hoover booth, and Andreas, I'm sure, will be wondering about the sponsor place. We also have some swag there now, which there might still be some left if you're lucky, some T-shirts and things, so do go ahead and have a look there. But thank you, Andreas. Join me in bringing a big round of applause for Andreas. Thank you so much. It was really interesting.